All right, welcome to our videocast on Neil Richards' fabulous new book, Questions in Dataviz.
Yay!
Very exciting. We actually have
Congratulations,
physical
Neil.
copies in our hands.
Oh yeah, we have the hardcover and also the soft cover. I have both
That's
of them.
right,
Wow.
two fisted books.
Yeah,
Very
these
exciting.
are good for exercise.
Well, if they're good for exercise, I have boxes of them around my feet, so I should be pretty fit by the end of this month.
What does it feel like to have the book in your hands?
It's quite exciting. Yeah, it's I never thought I'd write a book, and having written a book, I never thought I would see it in a physical copy. But it is, yeah, it's exciting.
That's good to know. Yeah, well, you know what they say, right? Once you write one, that usually leads to the second one.
Well, maybe, yeah. When I've been putting it, I've been saying I've just written my first book, and that sort of raised a few eyebrows, and people are going, "Really? You're going to write another one?" Well, never say never. Not just yet.
True. Yeah, I think you should bask in the glory of having finished this one for a bit. So I just read through the entire thing cover to cover, which was a lovely journey. So it translated very, very well to the print format.
Oh, thank you.
And I particularly liked this sort of progression from the simpler ideas to the more complex ideas.
Yeah, I enjoy that too. I wonder whether you could talk a little bit about the origins of the book, how it came about.
Well, the origins really came about sort of from my blog, which I started a few years ago, basically once I started getting into more and more data visualizations. And I sort of set it up so that each one was a question. And really, because often I found that when I was practicing something new or when I was learning something new, there was a lot around the subject or around the chart type or around the ideas that I had that people might talk about or that I wasn't necessarily clear about. And very often I didn't necessarily know the answer, but by sort of phrasing each post as a question, it allowed me to make sure that I was always sort of exploring something new. And it was quite good. It managed to sort of keep me on a good track as well, because each time I wanted to post something new, which would often be around a visualization I'd seen or a project I'd worked on, it always made me think, which new direction did I go in? Which new thing did I challenge or which new principle to really look at there? So it's not necessarily chronological in terms of some of the posts I made or the parts that are the journey that I took. It's been rearranged slightly more to make more sense, as you said, to go from the sort of basics through to the more to the idea section of things. But it's quite true to chronology in that sense. And that's kind of how it started, really, just making sure that there was always something that I was challenging or something that I was investigating with every new, initially every new post, and now with every new chapter.
One of the things I liked about how you structured the book, first of all, you had that series of first and then challenging and then idea questions. But then you did this great thing in the last chapter where you had a meta structure, because the last chapter, how to create 31 visualizations in a month, also refers back to a bunch of the questions you had earlier. And so I liked that as a sort of icing on the cake wrap up of there was questions, then there were more questions hierarchically.
Yeah, it worked quite nicely because it was a sort of jumbo project that I wanted to do, that I just sort of wanted to do a lot of things that were very much my kind of ethos or my kind of design thing. So I didn't do it deliberately, but as I looked back, I thought, yeah, that referred back to what I learned in that chapter, or that was a good lesson for that kind of thing there. So it felt like a good way to bring a little bit of closure to the book, because it has to be a finite number of chapters, because by definition there's a million different ideas you can have and a million different questions you can ask, and I answer very few of them, if any at all. But yeah, it felt like a nice way to bring it to a temporary end.
But that's actually one of the things that I like the most about the book. That is not it's questions in data visualization, not answers in data visualization. Otherwise, the title of the book would have been different. That's one of the things that I enjoy the most about your writing, which is that it sort of like reproduces, I think, that the experience of many people who learn how to survive in the field, which is always asking questions to ourselves. Am I doing the right thing? Am I going in the right direction? I'm taking the, am I taking the right decision in this particular context? Should I go in a different way? There are so many uncertainties in the design of any visualization. I think that the book reflects that quite well. What is the realistic approach to becoming a visualization professional, rather than trying to be a book that provides rules or principles, general and universal principles. It tries to take a more pragmatic approach to the field, which is something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I do mention some guidelines, particularly sort of in the first section, but I think it's, so, I mean, one example, I introduced some guidelines around colors, which are, one of the early topics that many of us learn. And obviously, what I am able to put into a chapter is just a very small amount of some of the theory out there. But, I was basically just able to say, well, there's a lot of things you need to bear in mind. And here's just a few examples of things that actually, do you need to think about this particular cultural observation? Do you need to think about this particular tradition? Do you need to think about whether pink and blue is a bit of a cliche for boys and girls, or girls and boys, or is it actually a good idea to use because of familiarity? And I introduce all these questions, and then at the end, I say some of the actions I've taken, but I don't sort of really answer the question. And I gave this sort of talk to a user group a couple of weeks ago, and a lady at the end said, "So what does that mean I have to do?" Said, I don't mind being pink, and I don't mind boys being blue, and I would be, I've listened to that, and I would still be happy for blue and pink. And I said, that's absolutely fine. I guess all I'm trying to say is there's always more to think about than you realize. And I can't provide the answers, but I encourage you to think about all these things, and then come to the conclusion that you're most comfortable with, or you think is appropriate for what you're doing.
One of the things I liked about the book was the tone. It felt very much like you and I were sitting down and having a cup of tea together, and you were just talking about your experiences in a way that helped me think. And so it's very much this idea of always ask questions. There's always more to think about. There are no pat answers. Guidelines can only get you so far. And I thought it was a very nice feeling that we had it was more of a series of cups of tea, like every chapter is a chat. And so it was a great experience. I feel like I know you much better now.
Thank you. No, that's a really nice compliment, and I've had that feedback as well, that it felt like a series of conversation, and maybe that's because it's sort of organically come from a series of blog posts. The preliminary material for a lot of this is things that I've written sort of relatively informally, and again, I've tidied it up and made them perhaps a little bit longer with a little bit more content in. But I guess it still maintains that informal, conversational type of thing. Some of it is in first person because this is what I came across, this is what I did, or these are my inspirations, this is what I've seen, this is what I took from this, and it's probably the only way that I knew how to write, sort of coming from that background, or certainly it seemed the natural way for me to do it. And I'm glad with your guidance that seemed to work really in a nice conversational way throughout.
How do you, perhaps we can talk a little bit about that writing process that you have just mentioned, because your experience is a little bit unusual. Usually an author begins writing the book, but in your case, you began writing a blog, and then eventually the blog got, I would not say translated, but it was sort of like transformed into something that looks more like a book. Can you talk a little bit about that process? Yeah,
so it did make it easier. Certainly, it meant that before I even started, I had a really good idea of what sort of material I had written a little bit about. So I was able to sort of take these chapters, and in the preparation, I already knew that I had all this written material, and it was a matter of sort of putting it into order, if you like, the order that we've spoken about, to take them through the sort of sensible structure of questions. And then I guess the process was pretty much right. Copy paste. This is where I'm going to start with. All right, I'm going to rewrite it, but a lot of the material is there, and it just it allowed me. In some ways, it allowed me to revisit what I thought maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago when I put it. Do I still think that's accurate? If so, then I'll perhaps just maybe not change too much, but come up with some more examples, some more background, and perhaps write it a little bit more neatly. I was going to say academically. It's not really academic. It is still conversationally. Others I changed around a little bit more. Perhaps I felt I knew a little bit more about the subject, or I'd come across sort of more examples that I was able to bring in. And others were perhaps a lot more of a I don't know, maybe clubbing together bits of 3, 4, 5 different blog posts. So it wasn't always a matter of straight one chapter is one post, but it did make it easier. Certainly, as someone who hasn't written before, it made it less daunting than writing however many thousand words or pages it is to start with, because I did have this body of work that I'd written and that I was able to use as a basis. So it was and it gave me a good structure. I knew the structure of my book before I'd written the first word almost, which is a lot more organized than I usually am.
What was the hardest part?
It's difficult to say what the hardest part is, I suppose.
Or maybe what was unexpectedly challenging? What was harder than you thought it would be?
Yeah, and that's kind of different, because I was just about to say that the hardest part probably is sort of turning my sort of style into a better kind of writing style. But I kind of thought that would be challenging, because I'm a mathematician who writes by fun. Nothing there suggests that I'm going to be great at writing sort of English sentences. I think in terms of what was challenging, I wish that there was. I think it's just the routine. I think sometimes it can be so obvious what you need to do and when you need to write it and what your structure is. And as I say, I have that all there, but it's very difficult to actually to make yourself do it, or to convince yourself that this chapter will take me this amount of time. It doesn't matter how organized you are about it, how much time you sort of give to it, how focused you are on doing it. If you're not, it's a bit like, I kind of knew this is the case when I do visualizations. So if I do visualizations for fun, so, if I'm in the zone, I can have a great time, and before I know it, it's the end of the day and I've got something nice up there. But I kind of, sometimes when you're doing that, if it just doesn't come, you think, oh, I'm not going to do it. There's no point trying to make a great idea come into my head. I'll go and do the chores around the house that I'm supposed to be doing. I found that writing was like that as well, and I didn't think it would be. I thought writing would be more prosaic. I thought writing would be, and especially with the fact that I had this, the structure that I was going to fit to, I thought it would be much easier to think, all right, it's Sunday evening, I'm going to do another 1,000 words in that chapter. But I found that I still needed to have that sort of creative spark to do it. Even though it was nothing to do with making creative visualizations or anything like that, I still needed to be in the right sort of mindset to write, which surprised me a little bit.
It is not a new experience, though. I mean, as Tamara and I, as co-editors of the AK Peter's visualization series, we need to coach a lot of new authors. And your case was slightly different because, as you said, I mean, you already have some material to work on, but most authors need to work from scratch, actually sit down and start writing something completely new. And we usually have these sort of like conversation at the very beginning of the process with any author, giving some advice, talking about how to get image rights, which is sort of like something prosaic, but also something that needs to be done. And then also conversations about how to create a routine. and a routine for writing. And that's one of the hardest parts. And every person is different. I mean, there are authors who are able to do exactly what you described. By the end of the day, after doing all their daily work, they can sit down for an hour and write for an hour. Bless them. They are super, super lucky because most people are not. I cannot do that. It's like after a day of work, I cannot write. I simply cannot write. I need to devote entire days for writing. And that doesn't mean that I write for 8 hours. It means that I fool around for 2 or 3 hours, sort of procrastinating, doing other things, getting ready. And then if I am lucky, I sit down and actually start writing for 3 or 4 hours or 5 hours if I'm lucky. And then at the end of the day, I'm completely exhausted because the process of writing, of pouring things out on a piece of paper on a computer screen is actually mentally exhausting for me. All right, that works for me. That routine works for me. But other authors are completely different. So the advice that we give other people is to say, try to discover what works best for you. Either you are a one day, one activity person like myself, or perhaps you are the type of person who can write 1 hour in the morning and then do other things that may be possible as well. So no, you're not the only one who has experienced everything that you have described. Like, right, Tamara? You're a little bit different than me, I think.
And what I found was this idea of, an hour every morning. It was hopeless. I could really only get writing done on sabbaticals and summers. And so for me, during the school year when teaching, there was just no hope. But also for me, because I was writing a more textbooky kind of a thing, the driving deadlines of, if I don't get something done by this term, I can't test teach out of it, was, so I had the bigger deadlines and the bigger hunks of time where I would really need, weeks to months to really be able to dive in and go deep. And some of the books in our series are very kind of academic textbooks. Others are much more sort of both written by and aimed at practitioners. And so, we've had a whole spectrum of these. Yours is clearly both, by and for practitioners at first glance, although I still wonder if people may well end up using this as a sort of supplementary textbook in some contexts. I could see it being a very nice way to guide people through all these questions. Because I feel like a lot of textbooks are about answers, and I would love them to first read a textbook and then to follow it up with this chaser of, but now there's all these questions. And everything you thought you knew that was a rule, now maybe it's time to question that.
Yeah,
it'd be a nice 1-2
like
punch.
That. Yeah, that's really interesting. And in many ways, it's not even the questions that are important to me. Although I hope that everything that is there does help the readers. But it's more the kind of mindset and the inspiration to think, okay, Neil had all these different questions, and these are just some examples. And out of that, here's a whole list of 9 or 10 interesting ideas that he had. If people have a similar kind of journey, the likelihood is they'll come across different questions and they'll come with different ideas. So it's not a case of what's in this book are going to give you answers to things that will really help you, but it is a case of if you get in the mindset or the idea of challenging these things, or particularly learning from those people who inspire you the most, figuring out what questions are they answering, or what questions do they inspire you to ask, then you can become creative and inspired by those people in particular. It's fascinating to me to know who will read it and what they will take from it. But I'm confident that I hope people will enjoy it in different ways.
Perhaps not reading it cover to cover, but just visiting the chapters that they think that are more relevant to their work, maybe.
I think so. I think although I've tried to put a sort of hierarchy and a sort of sensible journey to them, most things in there are kind of standalone. I would think, and I suppose that there's an element of hard to say. It's fairly inevitable because they were all, if you think of them as having been blog posts originally, they were all written as standalone, start to finish. So we pose a question, we discuss it, we have some other examples, and then at the end I put a simple conclusion that might say, well, these are the things we spoke about. So Yeah, I think it is. I hope it's the kind of thing you can sort of dip into just for inspiration, or just for a sort of, a chapter at a time to break.
Yeah, I think it works well in both ways. You can dive in and do one chapter, but I also like the sort of recurring themes where you speak back to it. Like, why do we visualize using triangles? That one keeps coming back to me. Somehow, since reading that chapter now, I just keep seeing ternary visualizations. So
Yeah.
you've, you know how when you buy new cars, suddenly that's the only thing you see on the road. Now I keep seeing triangles.
Yes, exactly. No, I've had a bit of that since writing it as well, and but yeah, and I've sort of done visualizations of, oh, shall I sort of put my money where my mouth is and do some triangles here, and sometimes it might work, sometimes not, but yeah, that feels fun. And there's probably lots of things that we could have posed, but it just sort of suggests, well, hang on, there are only certain shapes that you usually see used regularly. Here's another example of something you see more often than you think. So
how did the book or the writing itself change you? How is it in Neil Richards today? How are you different than you were when you began writing the blog or writing the book professionally or even personally?
yeah, I don't know if it changed me. I feel like it sort of it feels like it sort of really completes the journey through the blog, if you like, and it very much doesn't, because it's pretty open-ended, but it feels like a finished product. It feels like a finished product to so many questions, so many different projects that I undertook, so many visualizations, and so it's nice to sort of see it. It almost sort of, to me anyway, it validates the way that I've been thinking, or the different sort of things that I've experimented with and had fun with, and the fact that it's being commissioned and printed and enjoyed by some of the first people who've looked at it. It feels like it underlines things nicely and really sort of validates the thoughts that I've had. I mean, that's not to say that it's I did a podcast just now when the question was sort of what happens next, and I don't know. Maybe there's more and more sort of questions to keep asking. In many ways, often a lot of what I do is almost the antithesis of this, where I'm and with my other hat on when I'm at work and sort of trying to use absolutely the best analytical practices and trying to think of my audience and make sure they completely understand and can get the perfect takeaway from the graph. That's kind of the opposite to some of the directions I take you in the book. So maybe it's a chance to sort of think about data visualization in a new direction. But I mean, the fact is, I love the fact that it's such a wide field, that there's so many things that we need to consider, and it's all about context. It's all about considering your audience. It's which hat am I wearing here? Am I wearing my academic hat? Am I wearing my business hat? Or am I wearing my artist hat almost? And all of these things can be answered by data visualizations in different ways, in different contexts, as long as you're considering your readers.
There are always questions to think about. So who knows? There may be a follow-up, more questions in Dataviz, and then even more questions in Dataviz. That will be the third part in the series.
I think so. I think there's only two ways you can go for a sequel, which is more questions in Dataviz or answers in Dataviz.
Or answers in Dataviz.
I think more questions is probably more likely. I think that's an easier way to go than to actually answer.
Yeah, but structuring questions in the right way does bring you closer to answers as well. So.
Well, that's a philosophical position that we could debate. Some people would argue that questions just bring more questions at the end, and it's a rabbit hole.
Well, but I think that's what's interesting about it is when you ask questions and you try to answer them, I think that always elicits more questions in turn. But it's not just sort of an endless forest of questions, never, ever. It's not that it would terminate, but I think it's that interplay of question, answer, more answers.
I agree.
Well, I think you're right. Yeah, because I'm a mathematician by background. where everything that you learn is by a theorem, and then you actually prove that theorem. So that's answering the question. And then the next thing comes from a corollary, or it comes from a theorem which takes what you've just proved, and then you learn something new, or you come up with a new theory. So from that sense, it very much is question leads to answer, and that answer leads to the next question. But then in the same way, I am such a fanatic of data visualization, because it is so unlike mathematics. It is so unlike here is a question. We can prove what the best practice is. We can prove what the answer is. These are more there are opinions, or there are different answers, or there are spectrums of answer, or there's an answer depending on your audience. So it's very much not well, no pun intended, it's very much not a black and white field.
It's a human activity, not a mathematical field.
Right.
And as with any other human activity, there are never definite answers. They're just perhaps better, perhaps worse answers, tentatively speaking, that may lead to more questions, that may help us sharpen our answers and pose even more questions. It's a sort of like an endless quest. And that's one of the reasons why I think that this field is so attractive. Simply because there's so many things that are waiting to be explored, new ways to represent information, new ways to convey it, questions related as to whether we should stick just to data visualization, or we should expand our attention to other appealing to other senses, not just sight, but or vision, but also hearing. And I don't know, again, there may be opportunities for more books with more questions about visualization.
True. Just to be devil's advocate, I'll point out that there are some things that do have some more empirical answers. Visualization is very much a design field, but it's also very much running empirical studies with human subjects, which do reveal certain things. They tend to be, very focused, narrow precision things, and then you want to question what you can generalize out. What I like about visualization is that it's all the fields, right? It's design, it's computer science. Yes. It includes mathematics. I love that you have a whole chapter on visualizing mathematics, which is its own particular little subfield that many folks in data visualizations don't deeply think about. So it is many things all at once.
Yes, absolutely, and it's based on on visual science. It's based on psychology. It's based on on so many things, and we can sort of repeat that. I think that's why I've enjoyed it, and that's why I think there are so many practitioners who are so skillful and talented, who have such different backgrounds. I perhaps have a traditional route in through sort of maths, which suggests I'm analytical and logical. But there are so many people with liberal arts backgrounds. There's so many people with music backgrounds, with architecture backgrounds, with chemistry backgrounds, all these kind of things, because there's elements of all of these skills which can be brought into the subject. And let's face it, if you perhaps purely have a background in just one of these elements, then you still have a lot to learn, a lot of questions to ask, and it really helps you bring in other things. I've never been told that I've been creative or artistic until the last couple of years, and I'm still in denial when people say it. But I have found a medium, a medium based on using BI software or whatever it might be, the medium being data, to actually come up with something that can put shapes and colors and things on a computer screen, which I could not do. I could not do if you gave me Illustrator. I could not do if you gave me a pen and paper, because I just my drawing skills are that bad. Unlike yours, Alberto, I've seen some of your drawings; they're amazing. But that's that's why I say so many different skill sets come into it, and we all approach it from different directions.
That's something that I really enjoy about the field: the plurality of approaches, plurality of styles, plurality of ways of thinking about it. But I think that your book reflects that really well. Again, I think that your book, by posing all these questions and writing about your own journey in trying to find tentative answers, is a good reflection again of what it looks like, what it feels like to get into this field. We are half an hour into this conversation. I think that maybe we can wrap it up. What do you think, Tamara? Do we have any more questions here?
One last question. How did you decide to come up with this particular cover?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the cover. Yes.
Oh, well, that's a great question. I asked my good friend Ali Torban, who you can check out her work. She's a really talented designer from data visualization into information design. And I've seen some of her work, and she does some great work with tessellations and things like that. And I thought she will be able to design me a great cover. And so I asked her, I said, I want something that looks really cool, that looks very Neil, very me, that looks like I've thought of it, but I don't know what it is. And so I was probably a terrible client to her, but she was amazing. She went away, she looked at my work, she found a color palette that looked great and said, I think you like geometric shapes, I think you like them overlapping, I think you like, finding things coming from within that. And oh yeah, I do. I don't think I even knew that myself. He said, right, here's my first design. What do you think of that? I said, stop, that's perfect, that's brilliant. And because it was done a few months ago, I've been so excited. I've got the design on, put it on my watch face, I've got it on stickers, I've got it on, yeah. I've got a t-shirt with it on, which I thought of wearing today. Perfect. I thought that would be a bit going too far. But I thought it was really cool and eye-catching, and it was exciting to have the brand, a few months before the book came out. But yeah, I love that. That's Ali Torban. She's very talented. I think she's done the cover to at least one other book in the series as well.
Jen Christensen's book about science infographics,
which is about to come out in a small number of months.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
I'm excited about that one too.
Yeah. We are excited too. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having a video chat with us, and congratulations again on victorious book publication.
Well, thank you guys very much. Thank you for your support and for believing that a mad unconventional idea would make a great book. But I'm so happy, and thank you once again.
We love mad and unconventional, so
we do.
Yeah. Well, that's just as well, really.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Neil.
All right.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.